Welcome back to Morning Live. Bafana Bafana start their Africa Cup of Nations campaign with a clash against Mali at 10 p.m. tonight. The South Africans appeared in the same group with SADC neighbours Namibia as well as Tunisia, and there is a quiet confidence about South Africa's chances of getting out of the group stages. To talk to us about this, we've roped in News 24 senior sport reporter Khanyiso Tshwaku, a man that also doubles up as an analyst out here at SABC. Good morning, Khanyiso, thank you so much for joining us.
Morning, V, and morning to the viewers.
Let's get into the nitty-gritties of how important this fixture is for Coach Hugo Broos and his troops against Mali tonight, and the importance of starting off on a good note with a victory.
Well, Bafana do not know what starting an AFCON off on a good note is since 2004 when they beat Benin. So that is now 18 years. So kids were born in 2004 were now in matric. So an entire generation of football lovers have watched Bafana Bafana over the years at various AFCONs. They've never actually watched them win an opening game. I mean, we hosted the tournament in 2013. We drew that opening game. So that'll tell you about the mountain that they need to climb. And if you look back at Bafana's success over the years, when you look back to 96, when they won that AFCON 98, they also drew the opening game there, but you would find that in years when they did reasonably well, they also had a decent footing, which is odd that the time when they won in 2004 was the first time they actually exited in the first round, because they went and lost the second game to Nigeria 4-0. So when you look at the difficulty of our group, we've got Mali, we've got Tunisia, we've got Namibia. It becomes very important that South Africa actually go and win that opening game and get the 3 points in the bag. And when you look at the scheme of the opening game so far, I mean, look at Mozambique holding Egypt. I mean, look at Cameroon being held. I mean, look at Ghana losing. So it's one of those tournaments where if you are not quite sure-footed with your start, you may actually find yourself having the fight of your life trying to get into the last 16.
And maybe let's just divert a little from the Bafana conversation and just look at that a bit in terms of this AFCON has been one of hope, many can say, for all the smaller so-called nations, because they've really stepped up. And until Senegal won yesterday, we weren't seeing much from the big nations.
Look, I mean, there's always criticism in terms of why the African Cup of Nations is held every 2 years as opposed to 4 when you look at the different regional continental tournaments like your Copa America, your Euros, your CONCACAF Gold Cup. But you actually see in such results where a 2-year turnaround is very difficult for teams trying to find stability, because you'd find that in Europe, for example, you've got 2 big tournaments you need to worry about. You know that you've got your Euro cycle, you've got your World Cup cycle, whereas on the continent, you've got a tournament, you've got a continental tournament every 2 years. Then you need to worry about World Cup qualifiers and getting into the World Cup. And it's been proven that the CAF qualifying group is comfortably the toughest. And I think that's now permeating into the AFCON, because you'd find now teams that would ordinarily be seen to be walking over teams. I mean, the Gambia result was probably the odd one out. I mean, if you look at how the host team struggled against, not struggled per se, but weren't at their best against Guinea-Bissau. You start to realize that that 2-year turnaround doesn't quite allow for teams to find the footing, and also makes the qualification process difficult, despite the tournament now being expanded to 24 teams.
Indeed. Let's go back into the Bafana discussion, because we know the challenges that Coach Hugo Broos has faced ever since getting to South Africa. He's always mentioned the problems he has with access to some of the PSL clubs. And we look at now just getting into this tournament, the final squad that he took across to Cote d'Ivoire. What do you fancy his chances? Because we know that he's won this AFCON with that Cameroon team that was heavily criticized going into that edition of the tournament.
Look, I think there's what Hugo Broos has done over the past 20 but years is to find some sort of nucleus for his team. Whether that nucleus will now deliver for him will remain to be seen, because he's proven over the 21 game that he's able to find a way to play. And I think when you sometimes get to a level of AFCON, it's not about how you play, it's about just delivering results. And I think with Bafana, over the past 3 years, there's been a bit of madness in how Broos has approached these methods, but most of the time they delivered results. I mean, there is the outlying result of that loss to Rwanda, where clearly Bafana didn't adapt to the given conditions at the time, and they suffered for it. I think now they would have applied themselves enough, knowing what kind of conditions they need to expect, the opposition they need to expect, because now also you need to look at AFCON from a a different perspective in that, yes, they've qualified for AFCON. They didn't do it the hard way, but they got there to tournament. Where they get to now is going to be the next story, but they also got the bigger carrot of actually having to play Nigeria. That's in the World Cup qualifiers in March. So already now, the AFCON serves a means to an end to sharpen up for other targets, but it's within itself a target. So it's for Bafana, it's one. The target is just get out of the group stages. If they look too far ahead, they'll trip over their own feet. And when you look at Mali, for example, Mali was the first team to eliminate Bafana out of the quarterfinal stage back in 2002. Yeah. They eliminated Bafana from the quarterfinal stage back in 2013. So they've been a team that's given Bafana difficulties when it's come to continental football. Tunisia, we know Tunisia's pedigree. Namibia remain a team that South Africa have beaten at continental tournaments, but because there's so much shared values and shared football, they remain probably a reasonably tougher challenge.
Indeed. Let's talk about the Sundowns' influence in the Bafana squad, because this is one of the biggest talking points. How important do those players then become to Coach Hugo Bruce as he goes up against Mali tonight? Because we know the experience that they come with, having competed at some of the highest levels in continental football.
I think tournament football is generally dominated by teams who most probably every so often pick from a club that has a particular spine. I mean, one can't overlook Mamelodi Sundowns' domestic success and how regularly they've competed at continental level, winning the CAF Champions League in 2016. But they've had issues winning it since. But I mean, it also makes it easier for a coach to rely on a particular spine. I mean, if you look at teams like Italy, for example, when they won the 2006 World Cup, they had a very strong Juventus AC Milan spine. When you look at Spain in 2010, they had a very strong Barcelona Real Madrid spine. And you look at a team like Germany in 2014, where you could see the Bayern Munich spine. So when it comes to tournament football, it's always often easier to rely on players who kind of know each other, because then they become slightly easier to coach. It becomes slightly easier to relay certain messages, because at least you've got a group of players who are then able to play together, and then cohesion becomes the least of your concerns, because the one thing you need the most in tournament football is cohesion, finding that cohesion early and then turning that cohesion into consistency.
Indeed. Quick one, just in terms of your prediction, who's winning the game, or is it a stalemate?
I'm difficult. I'm bad with predictions, but when you look, I'll actually take the path of
South Africa.
I'll take the path of what's transpired over the past days. I'll go for a draw.
All right, a draw, and I mean, we've seen many of those coming through so far in this edition of the Africa Cup of Nations.